How scapegoat survivors can break the trance of tragedy. Have you ever caught yourself going over the same painful childhood memories again and again, searching for the detail that maybe will explain it all or offer some sort of catharsis? Maybe there's a scene you revisit, a fight with your parent, a time you were blamed for something you didn't do, or a moment when you realized you weren't being protected the way you needed. You might tell yourself that you're trying to make sense of it all, but no amount of rehashing seems to offer that sought after relief. Well, once you're in this thought zone, it can feel very difficult to leave it. Like you have to keep going and get to the bottom of the story of this thought thread at all costs. Whatever is going on in the moment may fade away, and it can feel like this is all that matters, as if you're transported somewhere else. The idea of then coming back from that somewhere else to this moment and interrupting that train of thought might even feel unwelcome, that it can feel like something too important would be being left undone. Well, if this sounds familiar, then you're not alone. For some or many scapegoat survivors of narcissistic abuse, the mind often becomes locked in a kind of a trance, looping through memories of a past that hurt too much to fully process at the time. But it's not just memory. In trying to process the memories today that couldn't be processed back then, scapegoat survivors can feel as though they're being mesmerized. And this state of being mesmerized is something I'll refer to as the trance of tragedy. And if not noticed, interrupted, and redirected, can become one of the biggest obstacles in recovery. In today's video, I'm going to explain how this trance develops and what you can do to notice, interrupt, and break free from it. Well, my name is Reid, and I'm a practicing licensed psychotherapist in California and a scapegoat survivor myself. I've worked to understand what helps scapegoat survivors recover the quality of life that they deserve. And this has led me to what I call the 3 pillars of recovery. Pillar number 1 is to make sense of the narcissistic abuse so that you know it wasn't your fault. Pillar number 2 is gaining distance from narcissistic abusers today and closeness to safe people. And pillar number 3 is living in defiance of your narcissistic abuser's rules. I also want to let you know about a free ebook I've created called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as a Scapegoat. If you grew up being unfairly blamed, criticized, or made to feel like you were the problem in your family, then this ebook can help you understand why that happened and how you can start recovering. It explains why certain children get scapegoated, how that affects their self-worth, and what healing can actually look like. If you've ever wondered, was it really me or was something deeply wrong in my family, this guide will give you the clarity and I think hopefully compassion you deserve to answer that question. You can find the link to the ebook in the description box below or by clicking here. So what is a tragedy? A tragedy is a story with a heartbreaking ending, where the hero doesn't win and where love doesn't redeem. Justice is denied and where suffering cannot be made into something meaningful. And it's the kind of a story that a scapegoat child is often forced to live. To grow up as a scapegoat in a narcissistic family means to live out a tragedy in real time. You needed love, protection, encouragement, and room to become your full self, but instead you faced emotional exile, blamed for problems that you didn't cause, and denied the love you need, as well as punished at times if you dared to be your true self. And the result can be a deep imprint that says nothing good comes from hope, that the world around you is unsafe, that connection is dangerous, and that you are the problem. Well, let's go to an anonymized case example to illustrate. Monica was born to a manipulative and cruel narcissistic mother. She would call Monica unspeakable names when they were at home and no one else was around. But in public, her mother would subtly mock and ridicule her daughter's efforts to make friends, do well in school, or in sports. At 8 years old, Monica heard her mother speaking in hushed tones to her friend Janet's mother. Her mother said, "My daughter, bless her heart, just doesn't seem to play well with other kids. You should see how she speaks to me when we're at home. It's just disgraceful." Monica, upon hearing this, felt like the floor dropped out from under her. She thought to herself, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with how she played with Janet. They always laughed a lot together. What was her mother seeing that she wasn't seeing? Well, Monica's father, for his part, was checked out emotionally. So she had no other adult to combat the messages that she was getting from her mother. If she went to her father with any complaint about her mother, he'd tell her to just stop misbehaving so that her mother would no longer get angry with her. Or he might grow enraged at Monica for continuing to complain despite what he had just told her. Monica coped by forcing herself to distrust her friends' positive receptions of her. It didn't make any sense that they saw her so differently than her mother and father. So she retreated socially and went into herself. She spent her free time reading and daydreaming for the rest of her childhood and adolescence. This maneuver switched the playing field from the relationship dynamics in her family that felt impossible to win to a one person inner world where she had more confidence in her ability to think her way towards solutions. She preferred thinking of the characters in her books to trying to make sense of her mother's contempt of her and her own confusion as to whether she deserved it or not. There wasn't a salvation available to Monica in the life she had to live at this time. Her only option was to find a way to survive it, and to her credit, she did. The lingering trance of tragedy. Why do survivors of this kind of tragedy find themselves so entranced by it? Well, I think there are two main reasons for this. First, what happened was unthinkable for one mind. A child can't accept that their parent doesn't love them. To even consider this would have meant permanently living in a world where they were nobody to no one. And so the child does whatever it takes to preserve some illusion of safety. The only way these facts could be safely thought is if the childhood had a relationship with another caring adult who could think these thoughts alongside the child. But the scapegoat child typically doesn't have access to such an adult. They're left alone to make sense of the emotionally and psychologically overwhelming experience of being cast off by the person that they were born expecting to be loved and supported by. That kind of a betrayal, if seen clearly, can't be psychologically survived by any child. So this leaves a lot of unfinished psychological business for the child, adolescent, and later adult survivor. They've lived through an experience that was impossible to know and make sense of because they had no one else to do so with. We're born with a need to know our reality, and yet the scapegoat survivor lived through a time when knowing their reality was just impossible. Once the immediate situation has passed, that need can reassert itself. But the adult scapegoat survivor must make contact with some of the overwhelming hostility and neglect they faced as a child in order to know their past reality. And that still can only be done with the help of another trusted mind. Finding another mind or person to trust after narcissistic abuse can be a challenge into and of itself. And this is why therapy, I think, can be so important. Until the scapegoat survivor is able to find and trust another person to make sense of what the survivor went through, they may keep going back to what happened in an attempt to think the unthinkable on their own, not with another's mind there to help them actually successfully do this. The second reason that a scapegoat survivor can get so entranced by the tragic past is that the scapegoat survivor may be searching for a perfect explanation that will also make the pain vanish. There can be kind of a magical thinking that trauma induces. Something like, if I can just figure out the exact right way to understand what happened, then I can release all of my painful feelings and finally feel okay. This thinking can also be a product of having to survive a narcissistic parent's devaluation, deprivation, and domineering alone as a child. The scapegoat child has to maintain faith in their ability to think themselves out of any problem they encounter. And they have to believe that they can do this all on their own. To need someone else to help them think through something is not an option as a kid. According to their family, they don't deserve help from anyone else. So seeking help would only yield a humiliating rejection and has to be avoided. The very thing that gave the scapegoat child hope can be what later keeps them fixated on the tragic. That unshakable confidence that they can figure out how to think about a situation enough to solve it can stay in gear when it comes to thinking about what they were put through. But the adult scapegoat survivor approaches these thoughts with the premise that there's a way to think about what happened that doesn't require support from anyone else and will result in a cathartic release from the bad feelings. Well, the problem is that this is never fully accomplished. The survivor finds themselves continually going back to scenes from their past, but never getting the release that they seemingly know they must get. And that release can seem like a carrot that they're perpetually chasing. So let's go back to Monica to illustrate this. She was intelligent and made it to college, then graduated with a degree in English literature. Then she took a job teaching at a high school on the West Coast, and she had grown up on the East Coast. She didn't know it at the time, but it was a strategic, though unconscious, way to put distance between herself and her family. One day she was clicking around on her favorite website, Substack.com, and there was an article that popped up about 10 signs that you grew up with a narcissistic parent. It caught her eye and she clicked on it. Her life would never be the same after that. She was floored to see so many of the ways that her mother treated her in this list. From undermining her self-confidence, to expecting special treatment at all times, to vindictiveness, her mother fit the bill. Monica decided to try therapy to see if she could figure out what all this might mean for her. She had always felt like her life was gray and that it always would be. But now she had a shot at finding some color, and she had a faint feeling of hopefulness for herself. Life in the trance of the tragic. Well, when your mind keeps circling back to your most painful memories, the present can feel less real. Your energies can get captured by the investigation of the past and are less available to the present moment. It can seem like the present doesn't count in the way that the past does, that the present will get much better once you figure out the past. And there can be a hard to define inner payoff to staying in the trance of tragedy. It can feel like being in contact with a presence that feels like where you absolutely should be. Often there's the felt promise that some essential truth will reveal itself and transform life for you. This requires staring harder and harder at the pain, yet the deliverance doesn't arrive. Scapegoat survivors may feel more fulfilled in a certain way when looking at the past, and a sort of emptiness can result when you try to take your attention away from it. Almost like communing with the dead via a seance. Only once the seance is over, waking life can feel like there's something missing, and that the only way to restore what's missing is to go back into the past. In a lot of ways, this dynamic is similar to what it's like as the child of a narcissistic parent. You could only feel connected to when you were with the parent. But being with your parent often meant missing out on all kinds of other sources of happiness in your life. And once you separated from your parent to, say, go to school, you did not feel like you could throw yourself fully into what you were doing if it didn't have something to do with them. You may have felt emotionally unaccompanied in your life when you were away from them, because it's likely that you were. And you may have had to keep your mind on what was going to happen at home to prepare for how you might next be attacked. All of these serve as parallels to how engrossing the trance of tragedy can be. That it wasn't safe and may not still feel safe to turn your full attention to your own life and your own independent sources of happiness. Breaking the trance of tragedy. Two truths that can coexist now. Well, here's the paradox that can be helpful. There was no hope of a better childhood than the one you have, and there can be hope for a better adulthood than you may have thought possible. The tragedy has in fact already happened. The scapegoat child was not loved in the way that every child deserves to be. That's not a misunderstanding, it's a fact. And the only way to stop being haunted by it, I think, is to face it with another person whom you trust today. And again, here's where therapy can be so important. In this setting, you have another person who's ostensibly trustworthy and safe, even if it takes a while to be convinced of that. Part of the process of recovering from narcissistic abuse is gradually restoring your faith that there are people out there who are trustworthy. As this sense of safety takes hold in your therapy, you get to think thoughts about what you endured in connection instead of isolation. The thoughts that might be hard to think on your own may not just be about the traumas you endured at the hands of your narcissistic parent. They might also be related to the second half of the paradox I mentioned, your wishes for yourself today and in your future. These thoughts would have been hazards in your childhood because your happiness only got in the way of your narcissistic parents' uses for you. In therapy, you get the experience of being accompanied as you think all the thoughts you have, including those that reflect your efforts to be happy today. You now understand how the tragic story told in isolation can hijack your attention, drain your energy, and keep you circling the pain from your past. Now the question becomes, how can I step out of that trance? And it's not enough, I think, to say I want to stop thinking about the past. And you may have tried that already and perhaps found it doesn't work. Well, let's go back to Monica. She liked her therapist. His name was Dan. He took her seriously and he seemed to think that her feelings mattered. And she liked how he reacted with dismay and anger when she described how her mother treated her. It felt like the protective reaction from her father that she gave up looking for so long ago. Outside of therapy, Monica was awash in her past. She found herself thinking back on times that her mother berated her behind closed doors. When these memories came to her, she felt transported, like she was communing with something that she needed to. Completing her lesson plans for her classes the next day often took a back seat to these musings. Something felt reinforcing about staying locked in on these memories. Breaking up that thought thread to focus on her job today felt mundane, empty, and like she was going from something meaningful to something meaningless. The trance of the tragedy of her childhood was in full effect at this point for Monica. The power of attention. Well, here's a simple truth that I think has big implications. Whatever we constantly attend to, we start to believe is more real. I think breaking the trance of tragedy requires a deliberate reorientation of attention from what happened then to what's possible now. If your attention is too consumed by the trance of tragedy, like if you wake up and reflexively revisit these memories, or if you look for evidence that you're still the problem, and if you expect the worst in every relationship, then the trance can become your emotional reality. But I think what is kind of good news is that attention is not fixed. It can be guided. And this is an opportunity. When you notice that your mind may be looping through tragic memories and you choose to gently redirect that attention elsewhere, one way to think about this is not just ignoring or silencing your pain. You may be reclaiming your life from it. And I can't think of a better example of pillar number 3, living in defiance of the narcissist rules. What it can feel like to shift out of the trance of tragedy. Well, at first it may feel wrong. Turning your attention away from the trance might feel like abandoning something essential, like you're betraying the truth of what you've lived through, or even pretending like it doesn't matter. But I would submit that you're not betraying your past by living differently. You can in fact be honoring it by refusing to let the people who hurt you dictate the quality of the rest of your life. And again, it may not feel natural at first. You may feel blank, disoriented, or guilty. And to the extent that can be tolerated, that can be quite helpful. These can be thought of as growing pains where your nervous system is learning how to be in a world where the trance is not the only story. And though these acts may seem small, I think they're big ways of defying the narcissistic abuser's rules. Because to the extent that you can shift your attention from the past of being the scapegoat child to your real and full life today, I think it's akin to breaking the rule of keeping all of your attention on a narcissistic parent and none of it on yourself. Here's a place to practice this breaking the trance of tragedy. Enrollment has just opened for my upcoming group class called Breaking the Spell of the Scapegoat. It's a live online 8-week course specifically designed for scapegoat survivors of narcissistic abuse. You'll learn how to recognize, interrupt, and shift your attention away from the trance of tragedy. And in this group that will be limited to 10 students, you'll be supported by others who are on a similar path. You'll experience what it feels like to be part of a community that doesn't run on shame or criticism. You'll be invited to try out new ways of being, ways that honor your story but don't confine you to it. So if you felt stuck, if you've tried to think your way out of the pain but always end up feeling like you're back where it started, then I think you might find this class useful. You can find the link to the class in the description box below or by clicking here. Well, I hope you found this week's video helpful. And I know there's been a bit of a break, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to regular weekly videos here. And again, want to thank everyone for your continued support of this channel and the resources around it and each other in the comments section. It's, I think really kind of combats the legacy of being a scapegoat child when there's so much visibility and responsiveness to the sort of stories that get told in the comments section and plenty of other places. And I guess in a way, just want to say keep it up, because I think it just goes such a long way in helping fellow survivors kind of know that what they went through matters and that what they're trying to do in life today also matters. And with that, I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.